Today, the Matt Walsh Show, President Trump launches an attack on Iranian nuclear sites on Saturday night. The next day, he mentions the possibility of a regime change in Iran. I've made my stance on U.S. interventionism in the Middle East known. Will I change my position now to keep up with the trends? No, obviously not. I'll give my full take and breakdown of the situation today. Also, Democrats had more important things to worry about, like the fact that JD Vance called a Democrat lawmaker José. And the good folks in Canada are always happy to lighten the mood by giving us something to laugh about. They've done it again. Now they're changing their street signs to make them completely unintelligible, all in the name of decolonization. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Did you know that all chips and fries used to be cooked in beef tallow up until the 1990s when big corporations made the switch to cheap processed seed oils? Today, seed oils now make up a staggering 20% of the average American's daily calories. Recent studies have started linking these oils to metabolic health issues and inflammation throughout the body, which got the folks at Vandy Crisps thinking there had to be a better way. They decided to go back to basics and create a potato chip with just 3 simple ingredients: heirloom potatoes, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. What makes Vandy different isn't just what they've taken out, but what they put back in. That grass-fed beef tallow isn't just for flavor. It's actually packed with nutrients that are great for your skin, brain, and hormones. When you snack on Vandy, you'll notice the difference immediately. Instead of from that familiar crash and bloat or sluggish feeling you get from regular chips, you'll feel satisfied, light, and energetic. The beef tallow makes these chips incredibly satiating too, so you won't find yourself mindlessly binging through an entire bag and still feeling hungry afterwards. Made 100% in America with 0 shortcuts, Vandy represents what snacking should feel like: satisfying and guilt-free. I've had the chips. I can honestly say that they actually are the best potato chips I've ever had, period. And I don't give that endorsement lightly, but it is actually true. Perfect crunch, perfect flavor. Ready to give Vandy a try? Go to vandycrisps.com/Walsh and use code Walsh for 25% off your first order. That's vandycrisps.com/Walsh, code Walsh for 25% off your first order. If you listen to this show and have followed my work over the years, you know that foreign affairs are, to put it mildly, not my area of focus. There are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that I'm just not that interested in what other countries are doing. The other is that, to my mind, focusing intently on the affairs of foreign nations comes with a significant opportunity cost. For every hour we spend talking about, for example, the mullahs in Iran who have supposedly been on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons for many years now, we aren't talking about catastrophic threats that directly impact the lives of American citizens every single day. And these are threats that we can easily solve if we choose to do so. To give just one example, yesterday a magistrate judge ruled that Kilmar Abrego Garcia can be released from jail pending his trial. This is the illegal alien and suspected MS-13 gang member whose alleged crimes include human trafficking and wife beating, who Democrats have turned into a hero of their party. And now the Democrats have succeeded in bringing him back here from El Salvador. And if this judge gets her way, he'll be free to roam the streets of Nashville, Tennessee, or anywhere else he wants to go. And yet, despite this very direct infringement on our national sovereignty and many, many cases just like it, no bunker buster bombs were dropped on MS-13 strongholds in Mexico or Central America over the weekend. We haven't sent the military to go destroy the Mexican gangs and cartels that have terrorized this country for too long. Yes, it would clearly advance our interest to eliminate these threats immediately using overwhelming military force, but we haven't done that. And there doesn't appear to be any plans to do that. Instead, as you've heard by now, of course, on Saturday, the Trump administration launched a targeted military strike against Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, which means that, for better or worse, Iran is not just a matter of foreign affairs anymore. The United States is involved. And now, very explicitly, the president is also, as of yesterday, talking about regime change in Iran. So here's what he wrote on Sunday, quote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA, I don't know, make Iran great again, is the MIGA. Now, the defense for that post will be that, and has already been, that Trump is trolling or that he's saying something extreme as a means to gain an advantage in negotiations, or that he means that the Iranian people should rise up and create their own regime change. And any of those interpretations could be true, but whatever his point, we absolutely cannot get involved in a regime change war. It's not up to the United States to decide what sort of regime rules over Iran. Least of all is it our job to make Iran great again. The greatness of America is our only concern. Now, of course, I have no doubt that if Trump did decide to launch a war for regime change in Iran, a certain sizable portion of right-wing influencers will discover that actually they're big fans of Dick Cheney-style foreign policy after all. We've already seen these pivots happening in certain corners. Now, that brings us to what should be the question, which is, did the attack on Iran actually benefit the United States? That is the only question that matters. And any reasonable person has to admit that there are coherent arguments on both sides. Now, the argument in favor of military intervention is that very soon Iran could, they say, build a nuclear weapon. That's according to Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who has testified that, quote, Iran can produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months if they decide to finalize the assembly. And she also said that in the same statement that they have no intelligence indicating that Iran actually is building a nuclear weapon, but she said that they could. And this is a country that openly despises the United States, as many Islamic countries do. They've waged proxy wars against us in the Middle East, often through intermediaries. They've launched rockets at our soldiers. The pro-intervention crowd says that the Iranian regime is evil and murderous, which of course it definitely is. As I said last week, the whole regime can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. Many of them already are in hell, no doubt. And so that was the argument in favor of military intervention, that this is an evil regime that's responsible for the deaths of Americans, and it could build, or maybe is building, depending on who you're listening to, a nuclear weapon. That's the case that was made by that side of the argument. And it's the case that ultimately won out, clearly. It's also, I think, wrong. There are some serious problems with this line of argument, problems that led me to think that it's a bad idea for America to get involved. And I still think that. I'm not going to change my position now just because Trump did the thing that I initially opposed. I'm not going to triangulate and try to find whatever position will be the most popular right now as I'm sort of reading the tea leaves. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you what I think, which is all that I ever do on this show. I can't promise you that I'm always right. I've been wrong about plenty of things, but I can promise you that whatever you hear me say, I'm saying it because I believe it to be true. All I can do is tell you what I believe to be true, and the chips will fall where they may from there. So what are the problems with the pro-intervention argument? The argument that, as already acknowledged, did in fact win the day. Well, first of all, as has been pointed out many times, and rightly so, this is all very eerily similar to the lead up to the Iraq War. It's not exactly the same. It's 20 years later. It's a different country, but the similarities are striking enough to give any thoughtful person a reason for pause, at a minimum. And more importantly, and as was the case with Iraq, when it comes to the question of Iran's nuclear capabilities, we unfortunately have no reason to trust the U.S. intelligence agency's assessment one way or another. They've lied so often and so consistently on everything from Iraq to the COVID lab leak to the fact that they, bombed civilians during the pullout from Afghanistan, that no one can trust them. In fact, even the President of the United States doesn't seem to trust his own Director of National Intelligence. Watch.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Now, after this clip was posted online, a lot of people claim that the reporter may have twisted Tulsi Gabbard's testimony somehow, but whatever your position is on that point, it doesn't really matter. It's evident from this clip that the President of the United States does not have any confidence in his intelligence community. I mean, you heard him say that they're wrong about this extremely important point about Iran's nuclear capability. So why exactly should we listen to anything they say? Who can we trust on the question of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Who is Trump listening to if he's not listening to his own intelligence? If he says that they're wrong? Okay, well then where's he getting his intelligence? These are all important questions. These are all valid questions. The other issue is that, like Iraq, Iran has not launched any kind of recent direct attack on the United States. And that doesn't mean in itself that we're not justified in launching a preemptive strike. It doesn't mean that we have to wait to get hit first, but it does make you wonder if this attack was launched primarily for America or primarily for the sake of and at the behest of a country other than America, namely Israel. In this case, there are very good reasons to be concerned that we got ourselves in a military conflict for Israel's sake and not our own. And that concern becomes especially pronounced when you listen to the kinds of things that our government officials are saying. For example, here's State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce just a few weeks ago.
The pride of being able to be here and do work that facilitates making things better for people, and in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel. It's an honor to be able to make a difference and to be able to speak in this regard with an administration that I love so much and that I feel genuinely represented by. It's a real honor.
Now, it goes without saying, or it should go without saying, that anyone who thinks that a foreign country is greater than our own should be barred from government service for life. This is disqualifying in about a million different ways. Now, you could claim that she's being taken out of context or that she didn't mean to say what she said, and those are all possibilities, even though her job as a spokeswoman is to speak clearly. But to my ear, it sounds a lot like she just said that America is, quote, the greatest country on earth next to Israel. And watching footage like this, along with the relentless warmongering on cable news, it's hard not to become more than a little cynical about our reasons for attacking Iran and whether America first was really the guiding principle at play here. For my part, I have a position that may not satisfy most people. I don't agree with the people claiming that Trump just betrayed his base and started World War III. I mean, at the moment, World War III seems like an unlikely outcome, in part because no other nation is rushing to Iran's defense. Iran is not a particularly popular country, as it turns out. And a lot of their neighbors in the Middle East, aside from Israel, don't want them to have nuclear weapons either. Additionally, it's hard to justify the claim that Trump betrayed his base when he has been saying for like 15 years that Iran can't have nukes. That's a point that the pro-intervention side brings up a lot, and they're right. I concede that point. To be sure, if this conflict turns into a years-long quagmire that costs billions of dollars and countless American lives, then Trump will have betrayed his base and sunk his presidency in the process. But if this is a one-and-done deal, as he initially indicated, it would be pretty consistent with how he operated in his first term and handled similar sorts of situations. But again, it's hard to come to any definitive conclusions at the moment. Yesterday, Iran's parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important shipping routes for oil in the world, but it remains to be seen whether Iran's so-called supreme leader will follow through on that vote, which will almost certainly result in more U.S. military action. On the other hand, I also definitely don't agree with the neocons throwing a parade right now, raising the mission accomplished banner and declaring that the Middle East has been fixed and a golden age of peace is upon us. Those were Dave Rubin's words, paraphrasing slightly. What they're claiming essentially is that all it took was a few bombs to fix everything. Well, but we've already dropped a lot of bombs. So the first 1 million bombs didn't do it, but the last 10 did the trick? That seems implausible. And again, it's way too early, to put it mildly, for those kinds of proclamations. Literally 12 hours after the U.S. dropped its bombs, there were legions of commentators on X claiming that the decision's already been vindicated and that those who warned against the move have been exposed as fools. 12 hours later, like the morning after, you could go on X and you would see, what happened, guys? I thought you said there'd be all this blowback. It's 12 hours later. Because, of course, if a military intervention doesn't result in anything bad within the first 12 hours, that means it won't result in anything bad at all, ever. I'm not making a straw man here. Social media is full of this kind of gloating and gaslighting mere hours after the initial assault. Now, again, there are major problems with this line of thinking. In particular, there are reports now that the strike didn't remotely affect Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. Both JD Vance and the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency have said that we don't know precisely where Iran's uranium stockpile is, and there's good reason for that. Days before the U.S. bombed Iran, commercial satellite images show that trucks appeared at two of the sites that we hit, most likely to haul some of the uranium away. And if that's the case, then we haven't obliterated Iran's nuclear program, as Trump said. We've set it back, but we would not have obliterated it in that case. And on top of that, of course, these attacks didn't destroy sleeper cells that we're told Iran likely has in this country, nor did they eliminate Iran's ability to launch missiles at U.S. troops in the region, or strike Israel for that matter, et cetera. In other words, this attack probably won't turn into World War III, but the chances that it makes the situation in the Middle East more chaotic, fractured, and therefore dangerous for America and Americans seems relatively high to me. I mean, that's the way that these things have played out for the past 40 years at least. It's certainly not unreasonable to worry that a pattern established over 4 decades may continue. X is full of right-wing influencers now declaring that, their fellow conservatives who have these kinds of concerns aren't real MAGA. They're traitors to the cause. Even though these are the very concerns that Trump ran on, and that many people in the America First movement, like myself and millions of others, have expressed for years and years. Meanwhile, John Bolton, David French, Nikki Haley, Lindsey Graham, Mike Pence, Jonah Goldberg, all support this attack. In fact, it's the first thing Trump has done this term that they like. So are they real MAGA now? Is that how things how things change? Also, taking a few steps back, there seems to be a real disconnect here. The same people declaring that Iran is a joke, friendless, isolated, impotent, and therefore we don't need to worry about any reprisals from them. Well, these were the ones telling us for the past 2 weeks that Iran is a clear and present danger to the United States. But how dangerous could they have ever really been if a few days of bombs has rendered them as threatening as a blind, limbless tortoise lying upside down on the pavement? Now, yes, if Iran had a fully functional ICBM, that would change things, but no one's even claiming that Iran was actively in the process of building a nuclear weapon or had established the capacity to launch one, much less that they had any plans to launch one at the United States. Now, how will this all play out in the end? What will the final analysis be? Well, the truth is that if you're excited for the opportunity to thump your chest and say, I told you so, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait several years. And because that's how long it will take for us to know for certain whether Trump's decision on Saturday night was ultimately right or wrong. Maybe on the end, it will turn out that Trump's actions made America less secure in the short term, but more secure in the long term. Maybe the reverse. Maybe it will be a disaster in the short and long term. Or maybe it will prove to have been a military masterstroke with no significant downside at all. Now, the realist in me says that the final scenario there is the least likely, but it is possible. And if that's how it works out, I'll be happy to admit I was wrong. I do think that Trump has earned a lot of trust on these kinds of issues. His foreign policy instincts have been excellent so far. But that just means that he gets the benefit of the doubt within reason. It doesn't mean he's infallible, obviously. He can be wrong. I think he is wrong on this one. And anyone who says that conservatives aren't allowed to or shouldn't disagree with Trump, or that it's, disloyal for them to voice their concerns when they disagree, is not a serious person and is also not a good American. In America, we can disagree with our elected leaders and say so loudly. Then there's the Israel of it all. And again, my take on that question is not satisfying really to any faction, I guess, because no, Israel is not the great Satan who can be blamed for all the world's ills. But I also don't think it's our responsibility to bail them out or enter into all of their conflicts. And I don't think there's any question that Israel deliberately backed Trump into a corner on Iran. They launched this attack on Iran while knowing that they didn't have the capability to finish the job. And on this point, although I thought that Trump's address on Saturday night was fine for the most part, there was one part that stood out, and not in a good way. Watch.
I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done.
So he says, we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. Now, this is probably a more revealing statement than Trump intended. Trump's own intelligence community said Iran wasn't actively building a bomb. That's what Tulsi Gabbard told Congress. and then Israel launched an attack anyway, our State Department responded right away when Marco Rubio put out a statement, a very cold statement disavowing any involvement. And then a little over a week later, we dropped these bombs. And now the president is talking about erasing a threat to Israel. I just can't interpret that chain of events as anything but Israel dragging us into something that we didn't initially want to be involved in. I mean, that's not my analysis. That's the State Department's statement after the initial attack by Israel. And this shouldn't need to be said, but erasing threats to Israel is not actually America's job. Period. America should be acting in its own interests to protect its own people. It should never do a single thing that harms its own people and its own interests for the sake of some other country's people and interests. Now, I'm no peacenik hippie when it comes to using force. I just think force should only ever be used when it's used by America for America. As I said, I'd love to see the military launch ruthless, devastating strikes on the drug cartels that have killed thousands of Americans for decades. So does that count as isolationist? Call it whatever you want. Again, why haven't we done that yet? Somebody in power should explain that to us as slowly as possible so there's no confusion. Drug cartels have killed more Americans than the Iranians ever have, directly or indirectly. And the criminal invasion of our country is a more direct and immediate and serious threat to us, to our country, than Iran's nuclear program ever was. I think there's no doubt about that. So why don't we use our military to neutralize that threat? Why don't we? Is it because Mexico is a sovereign country? Well, so is Iran. So are all the Middle East countries where we're constantly meddling. So again, why haven't we bombed every compound and killed the entire leadership structure of every cartel? Why haven't we just wiped them all off the face of the earth? Am I supposed to believe we can't? We don't know where they are? Now, if this attack on Iran was the right call, it will be because it made Americans safer. And if it proves to be the wrong call, it will be because it made Americans less safe. This is the sole consideration that will determine whether Trump's decision was right or wrong. The safety and prosperity of Israelis has no bearing on the final verdict, one way or another. If a choice makes Americans safer but Israelis less safe, it's the right choice. And if vice versa, it's wrong. Now, at the moment, the messaging from the Trump administration isn't encouraging on this point. Here's JD Vance explaining why this particular intervention in the Middle East is a good idea.
And the second thing is, Kristen, I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years, and that is what the president has set out to do.
Now, you know I like JD Vance a lot, but his answer misses the point, in my view. Barack Obama's problem was not his IQ. Neither was Bill Clinton's. Those are smart guys. Evil, but smart. And you can debate about George Bush's IQ, but there's no doubt that the people controlling the foreign policy in his administration were extremely intelligent. This is not a matter of intelligence. Sometimes very smart people will start very stupid wars. And in pretty much every case, they're making the same mistake. They think they can control variables that they actually don't know anything about. And that's the problem. That's part of the problem with waging foreign wars. It's a bit like trying to control the entire economy with Soviet-style price controls. Things get complicated very quickly. And having a good leader or a smart one doesn't necessarily insulate you from all the potential consequences once you go down that path. Now, I truly hope and pray that Trump is vindicated, because that will mean that America is vindicated. As long as he's the leader of our country, I want him to be right about everything he does, even if it means that I'm wrong. But he's not going to be right about everything he does because he's a human being. He's not God. And I'm afraid that this is one of those times when he's not right. But only time will tell. In the meantime, whatever side you're on, pro-bombing Iran or against it, the fact remains that we've now dropped the bombs. We've done more than Israel had any right to expect us to do, and we've done it, I believe, in defense of their national security rather than our own. Now it's time to take a look at what's happening within our borders. We should apply the same level of decisiveness to solving those problems, including military intervention if necessary, and leave other countries to handle their own affairs. That is not just a platitude. Okay, this country is in a state of internal crisis on multiple fronts. Our national sovereignty has been destroyed. We've been overwhelmed by an unsustainable flood of third world immigrants. Our cities are dysfunctional cesspools. Our education system is a disaster, only getting worse. Birth rates plummeting. And all this has happened while our leaders have been more concerned with starting or getting involved in or funding or engineering one foreign conflict after another in one godforsaken corner of the world after another. This just can't continue. That's why we say America first. It's why I believe it down to my core. It's not just a slogan. It's the only way forward. We need to turn our focus back to our own country, or we won't have one for much longer. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Ever wonder what gives elite athletes, business moguls, and high performers their edge? Many are turning to Armra Colostrum. This remarkable superfood is nature's original whole food supplement containing over 400 bioactive nutrients that work at the cellular level. Armra helps build lean muscle, speeds up recovery time, and enhances overall performance without relying on artificial stimulants or synthetic ingredients. Whether you're running a company, pushing your limits in training, or simply looking for a natural advantage in your daily life, Armra Colostrum optimizes your body's systems for peak performance and sustained energy. Research has demonstrated that colostrum does more than just strengthen performance. It enhances your body's ability to absorb essential nutrients, supports the development of lean muscle mass, and improves endurance. At the same time, it works at the cellular level to accelerate repair and regeneration, helping you bounce back faster after intense physical exertion. Plus, Armra Colostrum can also support your microbiome and balance and strengthen immune defenses throughout the body. And who doesn't want a stronger immune system? We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/Walsh or enter Walsh to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/Walsh. Pure Talk, my wireless company, a veteran-led company, believes every man and woman who has faithfully served this country deserves to proudly fly an American flag that was made in America. And that's why Pure Talk is on a mission to give an allegiance flag, the highest quality American flag, period, to 1,000 U.S. veterans in time for the patriotic holidays. Just switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk this month, and a portion of every sale will go to provide these high-quality flags to deserving veterans. With plans from just $25 a month for unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data, you can enjoy America's most dependable 5G network while cutting your cell phone bill in half. The average family saves over $1,000 a year from this plan. I've been using my Pure Talk phone for a while now and have enjoyed the reliable coverage for work here at the Daily Wire. Just go to puretalk.com/Walsh to switch hassle-free in as little as 10 minutes. Again, that's puretalk.com/Walsh to support veterans and to switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk. Well, the good news is that back on the home front, our elected officials are focused on real problems. They're locked in, they're engaged. And by that, I mean they've spent the last several days crying because JD Vance called a Hispanic guy José. And so here's the moment, the tragic, gut-wrenching moment. JD Vance was delivering remarks in Los Angeles when he made a reference to Alex Padilla, the Democrat lawmaker and theater kid who deliberately got himself arrested by Secret Service because he tried to bum rush the DHS secretary. And here's what Vance said. Here it is.
Well, I was hoping José Padilla would be here to ask a question, but unfortunately, I guess he decided not to show up because there wasn't the theater. And that's all it is. You know, I think everybody realizes that's what this is. It's pure political theater. These guys show up. They want to be captured on camera doing something. They want to be able to go back to their far left groups and to say, look, me, I stood up against border enforcement. I stood up against Donald Trump. When all they're really standing up for is for drug cartels to run rampant over our country and sex traffickers to be able to continue to traffic little kids into our country. That's what you're doing when you stand against border enforcement. So I think these guys, we ought to laugh them out of the building. We ought to call them out for doing what they're doing, which is grandstanding. And if they want to work seriously on border enforcement and on keeping their communities safe, the Trump administration's door is wide open. But they're not doing that. They'd love the grandstanding. They hate law enforcement because they hate the idea of the United States of America having a border. It's a disgrace, but it is what it is.
So he called him José Padilla instead of Alex Padilla, which is pretty funny. Would have been funnier if he called him Jose Quesadilla or something like that. Not that I would condone it. I'm just saying as a factual observation, it would have been funny if he said it. But anyway, the Dems have seized on this moment. This is the real crisis. This is the crisis. They're focused on crises, back home also, but it's this kind of thing. So here's Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, later the same day, indignant with outrage over this. Listen.
Mr. Vice President, how dare you disrespect our senator? You don't know his name, but yet you served with him before you were vice president, and you continue to serve with him today, because the last time I checked, the vice president of the United States is the president of the U.S. Senate. You serve with him today, and how dare you disrespect him and call him Jose? But I guess he just looked like anybody to you. Well, he's not just anybody to us. He is our senator.
How dare you? How dare you, sir? His name is Alex Padilla. Alex Gomez Enchilada Padilla. Call him by his rightful name, sir. How dare you? Now, the question is, would Jose himself, or Alex, if that's his real name, if that is his real name, would he forego the opportunity to play the self-pity card? When he's asked about this name kerfuffle, would he be an adult man and just say, "Oh, what did I say? He got my name wrong. Big deal." It's like, why even ask me about that? Who cares? Would he do that and try to retain whatever is left of his dignity, or would he take the opportunity to engage in theatrics? Well, we know the answer to that because, again, theater kid, as we've established, and this was his big moment. This is the moment in the script where he gets to deliver his big emotional monologue, which is what he did on MSNBC over the weekend. Listen to this.
He also went to Yale. I assume that he knows your name is Alex Padilla. Your response to him calling you Jose?
Oh, he knows my name. He knows my name. Look, sadly, it's just an indicator of how petty and unserious this administration is. But he's the vice president of the United States. You think he'd take the situation in Los Angeles more seriously? You think maybe he'd take a moment to talk to some of the families who have been impacted, have been terrorized, to feel what's really going on the ground? You saw him shaking hands with Marines, but did he listen to the Marines? Because we have, the report after report of the Marines, so many of the Marines themselves that don't want to be there. That's not why they enlisted. Or if not the migrant families, how about the employers, right, who I know are speaking up because they're concerned about their workforce? We've got a lot of important work to do, but this is how the vice president chooses to act, and that says a lot.
Are you going to cry, Jose? It really sounds like he's about to cry. It actually is. Keep in mind, by the way, these are all the same people who call white women Karen as a pejorative. And I mean, Vance didn't even actually do this on purpose, obviously. It would have been funny if he did, but he didn't. I mean, it was obviously an accident. He forgot Alex Padilla's name. Why did he forget it? Well, because Alex Padilla is irrelevant, and nobody knew his name until last week. Still nobody knows it, clearly. And so why did Vance's mind go to Jose when he blanked on Alex's name? Well, because Jose is a common name for Hispanics. That's all. What's wrong with that? Why is that scandalous? Oh, you only called him Jose because he's Mexican. Well, yeah, it's a common name. So what? If he was of Australian heritage, yeah, he probably wouldn't have called him Jose, but so what? And these same people do this kind of thing deliberately all the time when they call white women Karen. So you know what? If you can go around calling annoying white women Karens, then we can call annoying Mexicans Jose. Those are the rules you established. Don't like it? Too bad. And in any case, of course, this is what the Democrats are latching onto because they are desperate to change the subject from, actually talking about the illegal alien invasion of the country. And they are desperate to find their immigrant martyr, their Mexican George Floyd. And we've talked about this a lot over the last several months, that this is, you know, they need, this is the only way they know how to operate. They need to find their martyr, their cause, right? And they were hoping that Kilmar Garcia would be that guy, but that hasn't really worked out for them. And so maybe now it can be José Padilla. They're just like cycling through candidates until they find one that hits, because it's the only move they have. The emotional manipulation, the emotional blackmail, it's the only move they have. It's all they've got, but it's not going to work. At least I don't think it will work. You can never underestimate the propensity of the public generally to fall for these emotional blackmail techniques, and the left has used it to great effect over the years, especially recently. But I don't think it's going to work because people are fed up with this. They're fed up with the invasion of our country. They want their country back. This is what people want. Just like we talked about in the opening. This is what people want. They want their country back. Okay, Americans want their own country back. We've helped a lot of other countries with their own situations. Very nice of us to do. Trillions and trillions of dollars down the tubes. But we want our own country. And by the way, for not to backtrack to what we've already covered, but for the people who say, "Oh, we could do both," you know, no, we can't. Actually, no, we can't. History proves that we can't. Like, you can't actually be the world police and also take care of the situation on the home front. You can't do both. Which is why, as we have taken on this role of world police, the situation at home has deteriorated rapidly. It's not like some kind of coincidence. You can't do both. You either prioritize your own country and your own well-being, or you don't. Well, no, we could prioritize our own country, our own well-being, and also at the same time equally prioritize the well-being of all these other people. No, you can't. No, you can't. Okay, I wanted to mention this. There's a renewed push on the left to ban law enforcement from wearing masks. Some lawmakers in California introduced a bill to that effect last week, and now here's Representative Jerry Nadler complaining about ICE officers wearing masks. Watch.
But these people are wearing masks and are totally unidentified, and the question is why. The question is why. It's completely improper, and again, one has to assume they're hiding something, or they're hiding misbehavior, because otherwise, why would they be wearing masks and denying their identities?
You know, I'd like to say that it's inspiring to see how the Penguin got himself together and left behind his life of crime, but I mean, he is in Congress, so apparently he didn't leave it behind. But this is the trend now. Is you've got the Democrats who are very concerned about law enforcement masks. I mentioned in California, they want a law preventing cops from wearing masks. And here's one of the politicians in California talking about that. Watch.
People covering their faces, impersonating police officers, it erodes trust in law enforcement and it undermines community safety. That's really what this bill is about. And I think many law enforcement officials, legitimate law enforcement officials, would welcome putting in safeguards to ensure transparency and accountability. And I think the concern is a lot that's happening. There are a lot of people who are engaged in these enforcement actions, and we don't know, are they federal? Are they contractors? Are they local law enforcement? And so we're requiring that people not have to wear masks except for some very limited exceptions, and that there be identifying information ensures that we know who is involved here. It's also critical to uphold our state and local laws, including our sanctuary law, SB 54, which says that local law enforcement are not going to be involved in immigration enforcement. So this is, I think, furthering the state's efforts to ensure legitimate law enforcement purposes and to protect Californians.
So it turns out that I guess I could have saved my Penguin joke and used it for that clip too. I don't know if that guy's Nadler's nephew or what, but strikingly similar. This whole idea is actually very sinister. If you want to ban anyone from wearing masks, you should ban the rioters from wearing them. I mean, I would be in favor of a mask ban in general. You know, it's like people wearing masks out in public, going into stores wearing masks and all the rest of it. There's real safety concerns behind that, as we've seen. But trying to take them away from law enforcement is sinister, because they actually wear them for a reason, which is so that, especially now that everything is filmed, so that the leftist militants can't post their pictures all over social media and then try to hunt them down and kill them. That's the reason why they wear them. And so they want to take them away in order to make the situation more dangerous for law enforcement. To just totally demoralize. The ultimate goal, of course, as we know, the ultimate goal is the destabilization and ultimate destruction of our civilization. And one way to get there is because they can't defund the police. They tried to get that movement going, and it didn't really work out. It was a disaster for Democrats at the ballot box. So they can't do that. But they can find other ways. They can't defund the police, but they can find other ways of demoralizing law enforcement, of disincentivizing good people from entering into the law enforcement field. That's what they can do. And that's what they are doing. This is part of that. Every time you see a woke DA who refuses to press charges against some violent criminal, or a judge who releases the criminal back on the streets, it's all part of the same plan. Also very demoralizing to law enforcement. It's like that's the most demoralizing thing imaginable. Imagine you're working every day to and putting your life on the line to apprehend these violent criminals, and then you hand them over to the court system. The court system says, no, we don't want them. It just throws them right back out onto the street. So it's all part of that plan. All right, Danny Boyle is a film director. He directed the movie 28 Years Later, which just came out. Zombie movie, a sequel, or second sequel to 28 Days Later, which he also directed. I think the one in between he didn't direct, but I don't know. Anyway, he's on the promotional trail right now, and he's now joined the legion of filmmakers, actors, and comedians who are apologizing for their previous work. And in fact, there was another one just over this past weekend. Amy Poehler, I think, said something about how her previous SNL skits were racist or whatever and should never have been made. So this is a common theme. And here's The Guardian, reading now from an interview with Boyle. The author of this piece is someone called Zan Brooks, Zan with an X, X-A-N. So she writes, I wonder, though, how history will judge Slumdog Millionaire, his Oscar-winning 2008 spectacular about a ghetto kid who hit the jackpot. Boyle shot the film in Mumbai, partly in Hindi, and with a local crew, but it was a film of its time, and the world has moved on. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to make that now, Boyle says, and that's how it should be. It's time to reflect on all that. We have to look at the cultural baggage we carry and the mark that we've left on the world. Is he saying that the production itself amounted to a form of colonialism? No, he says. Well, only in the sense that everything is. At the time, it felt radical. We made the decision that only a handful of us would go to Mumbai. We'd work with a big Indian crew and try to make a film within this culture. But you're still an outsider. It's still a flawed method. That kind of cultural appropriation might be sanctioned at certain times, but at other times, it cannot be. I mean, I'm proud of the film, but you wouldn't even contemplate doing something like that today. It wouldn't even get financed. Even if I was involved, I'd be looking for a young Indian filmmaker to shoot it. You know, I can't really fully describe just how much contempt I have for people like this. I mean, first of all, the guy doesn't even have the courage of his convictions. Notice the way he tries to play both sides. You know, he asks if Slumdog Millionaire, he's asked if Slumdog Millionaire is colonialism, and he says, no. Well, only in the sense that everything is. So it's not colonialism, but everything is colonialism. Which, what the hell does that even mean? Everything is colonialism? So colonialism is responsible for what? Existence itself? I mean, I was already kind of a fan of I'm a fan of colonialism, historically anyway. Not so much the modern form of it. But apparently it's even better than I thought. So that doesn't make any sense. But he does get around to apologizing for making the film and saying that, you know, you couldn't and shouldn't make a film like that today. And as I said, many filmmakers, actors, and comedians are doing this now. And what's the common thread between all of them? Well, you have aging artists who are well past their prime, who enjoyed their full freedom of artistic expression during their prime, now trying to pull the ladder up behind them. They're pulling the ladder up and saying, no, never mind. No one's actually allowed to do this. Actually, no one's allowed to do this thing that we did and made us millions of dollars and made us famous and respected and successful and admired. No one else can do this. And it's not just pulling the ladder up. It's more like leaving the house and lighting it on fire on the way out the door. I mean, it's like dousing the whole thing in gasoline and burning it to the ground. People like Danny Boyle aren't just making it harder on future artists. They're trying to kill the art itself, because this is the death of art. This is the death of filmmaking. Danny Boyle made Slumdog Millionaire because it was a story he wanted to tell. It was his story that he wanted to tell. And that's why he made it. But now he's saying that storytellers shouldn't tell stories that they want to tell. They should give the stories to somebody else. Which is like saying that a painter shouldn't paint the picture that he has in his own head. He should get someone else to paint it for him. Right? If you want to paint a picture of something that isn't, if you want to paint a picture of a person who isn't you, you need to go get that person to paint it. And why is Boyle only apologizing for Slumdog Millionaire? I mean, he made the 28 Days Later films, even though he's not a zombie and has never experienced a zombie apocalypse. Well, he is British, I believe, and there's something like a zombie apocalypse happening in Western Europe right now. So maybe I'll give him that one. He made 127 Hours about the guy who got his arm stuck by a rock and had to cut his own arm off. And I'm pretty sure Danny Boyle has never cut his own arm off, or any limb, as far as I know. He made Train Spotting, even though he's not a heroin addict, as far as I know, again. So the guy doesn't even have the courage of his convictions. But the main thing is just this act by these washed up comedians and artists and filmmakers to, as I said, just pull the ladder up, burn the bridge behind them. No one's allowed to follow. It is really reprehensible. This month, Tax Network USA proudly celebrates our nation's birthday, honoring freedom, resilience, and financial independence. To mark the occasion, they're offering 10% off all services throughout July 4th. If you're dealing with back taxes or missed the April 15th deadline, don't wait. The IRS is rapidly stepping up enforcement. Penalties can add up quickly, up to 5% per month, maxing out at 25% of your total tax bill, just for not filing. That's on top of what you already owe. But there's good news. Tax Network USA can still help you turn things around. Whether you're self-employed, you run a business, or your books are a complete mess, their team knows how to cut through the chaos and find solutions that work. Your consultation is always free, and getting ahead of the problem now could help you avoid harsh penalties, wage garnishments, or surprise bank levies. Take the first step. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh. And don't forget, you'll get 10% off all services through July 4th as part of their celebration of our nation's birthday. Regain control of your finances with expert help from Tax Network USA. By the way, if you're not a member at Daily Wire Plus yet, now's the time to change that. You get every single Daily Wire show, including this one, at least an hour before anyone else, completely ad-free and uncensored. But it's more than just early access and getting premium content. It's about joining a community of people who want the truth, respect tradition, and are armed with good old-fashioned common sense. This is where like-minded people come together to push back, speak up, and build something the left can't cancel or burn down. If that sounds like you, join now at dailywireplus.com. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. We're all familiar with the idea of comic relief in various art forms. Its job is to relieve tension when things are getting a little too heavy. And unfortunately, comic relief isn't just limited to the movies or the theater. In real life, as we all know, there are actually millions of people who have committed themselves to entertaining the masses, even when everything seems to be falling apart. They are the pressure relief valve for the world. And I'm talking, of course, about the nation of Canada. No matter what's going on, war in Iran, stock market collapse, airplanes crashing, the people of Canada remain laser focused on beclowning themselves for our amusement. It is their purpose in life. Long after Canada officially becomes a colony of India and literally no Canadians have a job or the capacity to feed themselves, they'll spend their last dying breaths finding ways to entertain us here in America. And we should be grateful for that. And as if to prove my point, the big story in Canada this week, I won't even do the whole intro. I'll let one of Canada's many fake news outlets take the reins from here. Watch.
How's that for grabbing your attention? It's the kind of ritual that's been going on here for thousands of years. In Kitsilano Friday, it happened alongside a more contemporary one.
Is today an incredible day or what? Woo!
The story of this street name change is both a practical one of day-to-day urban living and an emotional turning point for the Musqueam Nation.
Our ancestors were forced to speak English. They were forced to do away with our language. And if we're walking reconciliation, we walk together.
The street formerly known as Trutch had been named after BC's first lieutenant governor, whose views and policies about First Nations people are now recognized as racist and wrong. The Musqueam have long been troubled by having to look at it, and there was unanimous support at City Council to take it down.
So they have some obese guy in feathers and face paint dancing in a suburban neighborhood as the mayor says this is an incredible day. And he does a little woo to really get the crowd going. And then we learn, thanks to another obese guy in feathers, whose name is Chief Wayne, which is pretty funny all by itself, that the Musqueam people are mad that they were forced to speak English. And to that end, they're getting rid of a street sign named after a civil engineer named Joseph Trutch. And according to the Canadian news anchor, who speaks in the most patronizing tone imaginable, Joseph Trutch is a very mean and racist man. So it's good to get rid of this random street sign. And before we go any further here, a couple of points need to be made right off the bat. First of all, Joseph Trutch contributed more to British Columbia than any of these overweight men wearing costumes or their ancestors ever did. He was the civil engineer behind the creation of the old Alexandra Suspension Bridge, which is one of the main reasons British Columbia grew into a viable province. It became a lot easier to move gold in and out of British Columbia and later on automobiles because of that bridge. And then Trutch became BC's chief commissioner of land and works. And in that capacity, he didn't allow the primitive tribes to continue wasting the potential of all this land. And therefore, now they're vilifying him. Secondly, the idea that the white man is the reason that Musqueam people never had street signs in their language is absurd. They never had street signs in their language because they never had streets or signs or a written language. Men like Joseph Trutch came in and brought all of that. They brought language and civilization and commerce to what is now British Columbia. But instead of celebrating Joseph Trutch, they're now slandering him and taking down his street sign. And here's what they're replacing it with. Get ready for this.
Every symbol has a sound, and they're all sounded out.
Well, the English translation is Musqueam View. The new legal name of the street is written in characters from the North American phonetic alphabet, a system developed by linguists to express words from First Nation languages. Here's Mayor Sim having a go at it.
Today, we officially renamed Trutch Street to Shmukwim Awesome Street.
It's fine by me. It's progress. Put it that way.
Shmukwin Awesome Street, I believe is what he said. He was either pronouncing the street name or he was sneezing. I'm not really sure. It's impossible to tell. Now, there's one thing I will say is if you use that word in Scrabble and hit a triple word score, it would be worth 85,000 points. That's the good news. The other big good news is that some of the best deadpan comedians in the world live in Canada. They just don't realize it. They are absolutely, completely, 100% sincere when they say that it's progress to replace a normal street sign with one that is incomprehensible. I mean, you might think that human progress means colonizing Mars or developing self-driving cars or, curing diseases or something like that. But in Canada, progress means something very different. It means making it impossible to order pizza to your house because nobody knows what the hell the street sign says. That's progress in Canada. And never mind pizzas. What happens when somebody calls 911? And the funniest thing about this whole situation, of course, is that the sign isn't actually written in the language of the primitive tribe because they didn't have a written language. Instead, as you heard, it's written in some kind of fake language invented by academics who are attempting to transfer the primitive language of the Musqueam people into written English, which is why it looks like a Wi-Fi password. A very strong Wi-Fi password, but a Wi-Fi password nonetheless. Either that or it looks like maybe a mathematical equation written by a schizophrenic on the walls of his padded room, like the kind of equation that could either be total nonsense or the key to interstellar space travel. You never know. Now, if this were a South Park episode, you wouldn't need to add anything to it. By itself, it is a self-contained, entertaining premise for an episode. Canadians who are upset about colonialism decide to invent some gibberish language to pay tribute to the illiterate tribes who hate the guy who built British Columbia. It's perfect. No notes, as the kids would say. But believe it or not, it gets better. Watch.
About half the Kits residents we spoke with told us they support the change. Others, though, said they were frustrated at the prospect of updating IDs and documents in an alphabet they don't know. And the neighboring Squamish Nation weighed in, saying they weren't properly consulted. But as the new signs were unveiled Friday, it was nothing short of an historic moment. Musqueam people seeing their ancient language live on.
Did you get that? The neighboring Squamish Nation was upset by this new sign because they weren't consulted. Can you imagine? It's almost as if there were a lot of primitive tribes that lived in that area back in the day, and it's almost as if they all took land from the tribes who were there before them. And it's almost as if it's a waste of time to try to appease any of these people because you're only making them more emboldened and more entitled and more annoying. And there's another problem here as well. One of the many things that irks me about these kinds of stunts, even though it's happening in Canada, it is funny and we can laugh at it. But the part that irks me is that it gives the so-called indigenous people something they didn't earn. The only reason that there are paved roads with street signs, not to mention modern cities, is because of the European settlers who came here and brought civilization along with them. If the so-called indigenous people want street signs named after them, they should have figured out how to build streets and towns in the first place and write a language. They didn't. Therefore, they don't get to name the streets. It's pretty simple. What makes the situation all the more galling is that if you look at the current state of British Columbia, they have much bigger problems than catering to the delusional whims of obese Indian activists. This is what Vancouver looks like right now. You can see it there. This is footage from the YouTube channel Life in Canada by Lucy. It was shot in this week in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia. Block after block, you see tents, homeless people doing drugs, mentally ill vagrants freaking people out. If Canada were run by people who took themselves seriously, by moral men who wanted the best for their citizens, this would be the only thing that they'd be talking about. They wouldn't mention climate change. They wouldn't talk about tariffs or Iran. They certainly wouldn't talk about random street signs in the suburbs. They do something about the collapse of their country, which is becoming more and more apparent by the day. But Canada's leaders are not interested in averting the collapse of their country. They're only interested in accelerating it. On the bright side, at least they're giving everyone else in the world something to laugh about in the process. And that is why the Canadians, who just changed the name of a random street so that it honors a strong Wi-Fi password instead of a great man, are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.
The U.S. bombs Iran. President Trump goes to war with Thomas Massie, and JoJo Siwa blames the LGBT LMNOP community for pressuring her into becoming a lesbian. Check it out on The Michael Walsh Show.